Joining me now, Democratic Senator Gary Peters of Michigan. He sits on the Armed Services and Homeland Security Committee. Senator, thank you so much for your time. I want to get to that conversation in just one second, but we did just hear from the Republican leader in the Senate, Mitch McConnell, and he had some words for you Democrats about Donald Trump's cabinet picks. He said you are engaged in a futile gesture to try to stop his cabinet picks, and then he said this. Please listen, Senator.
On any given nominee, it's pretty clear what's happening. They want to move them as slowly as possible. And on the ones they have deemed controversial, they want to give their left-wing agitators enough time to get up and get organized.
He also said at another point, Senator, they want to delay it as long as possible to play to the left-wing base just because they cannot accept the outcome of the election. Is that what's going on?
No, not at all. And it's not about relitigating an election. It's about making sure that we have qualified people in these positions. It's a constitutional duty of the United States Senate to provide advice and consent. And that's the process that we're going through. We're having hearings. We're asking questions. The American people have a right to hear these questions asked and a right to hear the answers. We have supported some nominees. Voted for some nominees, General Mattis, for example, for Secretary of Defense. I think he's going to do an outstanding job. But there are others that I have issues with as a result of the answers that they have provided. And it is important. And the American people have engaged. And we saw a Secretary of Labor that basically withdrew because he simply didn't have the support, because he didn't have positions that the American people could accept. So this is an important process.
That all, of course, came out even before he had a confirmation hearing, before he even could have seen any kind of a delay in terms of, Democrats pushing for a delay. But do you acknowledge, at least when it comes to the nuts and bolts of how all of this works in the Senate, that it is a futile gesture to try to slow it down because Republicans have the votes, especially when it comes to Scott Pruitt, which is the latest target for Democrats?
Well, I don't think it's ever a futile gesture to bring transparency to the process. This is about making sure folks are answering questions, then we understand what we're getting. These are people that are going to have a big impact on the country. The American people should have them fully vetted. This is part of the vetting process. This is why we wish with Mr. Pruitt we could take a look at emails that are going to be coming out next week. But Mr. McConnell wants to jam it through today because he doesn't want to see those emails. I think they're very fearful of what's going to be in those emails, which is why they're jamming it through here today instead of waiting for us to have an opportunity to fully vet. I think
if there's something in those emails, even when they do come out, the American people will want to hear about it if there's something to see. Let's talk about the other big issue that I kind of led to. Let's talk about Michael Flynn and the latest that we've heard. I want to, especially with your committee assignments. Law enforcement sources are now telling CNN that Michael Flynn changed his story in his interview with the FBI, but they also say that they're not likely to pursue charges against Michael Flynn. Your reaction?
Well, that's why we have to get more details from Flynn. I'd like to know exactly the conversations that occurred with the ambassador, what was said with the FBI. If he misled or lied the FBI, obviously that is a criminal charge. That could still come about. We need to have more transparency, but it's more than just about Mr. Flynn. This is a long trail of smoke related to Russian involvement, from the known involvement that they've had in the election to the stories about the campaign officials speaking regularly with the Russians. Now Mr. Flynn talking about dealing with pulling back sanctions that were put in place because of their involvement in this election. And then at the same time this is happening, you've got a Russian spy ship off the coast. You've got the deployment illegally of nuclear intermediate weapons in Europe. You've got crazy flybys of U.S. naval war vessels. Where is the commander-in-chief? Why is he not speaking out against the Russians? Is he weak? He needs to show some strength. The only thing the Russians understand is strength, and right now we're seeing a weak commander-in-chief. Donald Trump needs to step up, and is there a reason for this? Perhaps the smoke that we're seeing is a reason why he is not being strong.
And so when Donald Trump spoke out about it, he called all of those provocative actions not good. And said yesterday that was basically his response. That's not showing the strength that that's not satisfactory to you.
No, not at all. I mean, you've got to be very forceful in showing the United States will not stand for this. You certainly should now. We should never be allowing the deployment of nuclear weapons in violation of a treaty that was signed back when Ronald Reagan was the president. It's been a part about keeping peace in Europe, keeping peace in the world.
But what is the strong response? What is the strong response, though, Senator? Because as Donald Trump, maybe in his own non-traditional way, said yesterday, the greatest thing that everyone would want me to do is to shoot that ship right out of the water, but I'm not going to do that.
Well, obviously that's not the answer that the American people want at this time, but we do want to see a response, whether it's more sanctions, whether it's other actions that we take. You know, the president is supposed to be our commander-in-chief. He is supposed to be the leader of foreign policy. It's time for him to demonstrate that. In fact, it's past for him to do that.
So, Senator, the president is now searching once again for a national security advisor. He tweeted this morning that the temporary advisor in place right now, the acting advisor, General Keith Kellogg, is being considered for the full-time job along with others. Would you support that?
I will have to take a look at that and see what the others are. We're going to have to go through the process. You know, I haven't been privy to detailed information about his background. So let's see how this unfolds.
What about David Petraeus? That's a background that most everyone is familiar with, and he's been talked about as being up for the job as well.
You know, that's a potential candidate. He certainly has tremendous knowledge about world affairs, and he has knowledge about the military. I've had a chance to meet with him. I certainly have been impressed with his knowledge, but of course he has other issues as well that we have to be considered.
We call that baggage, Senator. That is the truth.
Yes.
Thank you, Senator, for coming on. Really appreciate it.
Great. Thank you so much.
All right.